Hello and good evening, Matthew Commons. How are you?
I'm doing great, Adi. It's great to be here.
Thank you. You know, the backstory for those who've just joined us is we just had a meeting for about an hour, and I decided to just jump on the bandwagon and just invite you into this recording because, you know, you're one of the smartest guys I've interacted with, and I deal with a lot of smart people. So I just thought, let's take the opportunity to fire away a couple of questions, and I think we'll see where we go. I believe it will be a very interesting rabbit hole.
Sounds great.
Okay, so my interactions with you have been from an investment round of raising advice perspective, and something that is out of my comfort zone, and your feedback was so good. So I guess one of the key questions, because anybody watching this is either a director in a business or a big business, or somebody who wants to open a big business and is an entrepreneur. It's different angles. I guess the one thing really is, at the moment, we seem to be in the entrepreneurs are awesome era. Why is that the case? Well, what has happened that has caused people to not know the fact that, in fact, it's terrible being an entrepreneur? It's glamorous. It just seems glamorous. So why are we in this like entrepreneur era, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an exciting time to be alive right now. You know, if you look at all the changes happening in the world, I think that just really recently, the most valuable companies, the companies that have grown the most, that are doing the most exciting things, are some of the newest companies. You know, we're at the point now where in the past week, the NASDAQ has hit a new all-time high again, despite COVID, and S&P 500 is back up there again. And what's this is really being driven by what today is big tech. But if you look at that, you know, these are companies that were, you know, founded in the last decade and a little bit. The scope of the change that we've seen recently, the pace that this has developed. I mean, Mark Andreessen says software is eating the world, but you know, you look at what's happening and what's exciting, certainly in the tech and in the software space, but you know, also in conventional industries like your you know, another fellow originally from South Africa, Elon Musk, doing things in as well. There's just a level of excitement that you know, makes people pay attention. Now, of course, the downside of that and the tough life of being an entrepreneur, people pay lip service to it. But I think until you've really lived it, it's hard to appreciate the challenges that you go through there.
Absolutely. And so, you know, if one is looking at it from the VC's perspective, you know, they have the power. You know, they've got the money. They go through tens of applications, and so what are they looking? I guess it depends. Just give me a quick synopsis of the different types of investors out there for those who don't know. I mean, it's a loaded question, but just the different types of categories, because ultimately, well, VC, but in fact, there's just a lot of different categories.
Yeah, absolutely, and you know, there's many sources of capital, and there are sources of capital that are right for some businesses and wrong for others, and so forth. So I think one of the big things to think through is, you know, what's your business plan, and how does it work, and really think through what you need to be successful. And then, you know, I think being an entrepreneur is all about what is the opportunity, and thinking about what is the business opportunity and what's exciting about this first before going through and thinking about the financial constraints. You know, if you've got a great idea and you've got the right pieces in place, in principle, you should be able to find money. So financing is not really the first thing to start thinking through. And a lot of people, you know, bootstrap businesses. You know, you've done an amazing job yourself, Adi, without raising a ton of external capital. That's often the best way to do it. You know, retaining control and being able to know what's happening. A lot of people will raise money from friends and family, or as it's pejoratively called sometimes, triple F, friends, family, and fools. People that are sometimes, they know you, they like you, and they'll give you some money to get started on maybe sort of non-market terms. Some of the things, depending on where you are, is angel investors. I think having, raised money in the U.S., I think one of the things that, is a little bit more well developed. There are these kind of angel groups that, in certain cities that you can have groups that get together and evaluate businesses and invest in them. And you always get good advice from these either way. Going on to seed funds and then the various stages of more professional VC. But the world is changing. There's lots of new sources of capital out there. Even angel investing. It used to be you had to live in some of these cities that had really exciting communities, but now there's angel lists. There's lots of things online, and many businesses are not just the proverbial founder in a garage with a small team, but they're virtual and distributed businesses. So I think really provides a lot of opportunity for reaching out, even if you're not in one of the areas that are traditionally the hotbeds of startups. But yeah, I mean, going through and what are they, what are these VCs looking for and so forth.
So that brings me to the next question. Is in one of your communications to me, the term sticky revenue came up. That's what they're looking for, isn't it? They're looking for sticky revenue. Because ultimately, as a business owner, you also want sticky revenue, don't you? What is sticky revenue? I mean, I think I know what it is, but please just tell me what we should all be aiming for here.
Sure, and what VCs may be looking for are not necessarily the right thing. I mean, I think that should be said out of the gates. It depending on what your goals are as a person and what your goals are for the business. Although there's a lot of hype and excitement around raising venture capital, it can come with a lot of strings and challenges as well. But I think one of the things that we talked about in our communications are one thing that VCs and investors generally like are recurring revenues and this idea of sticky revenues. Things that there's not a lot of volatility in what you're doing, and they can just invest more money and you're just going to be able to make it grow. And I think if you look more broadly at businesses, different types of revenues are, some are more volatile than others. One example is, if you look at banks, for example, some banks may have proprietary trading arms that make a lot of money, but sometimes those don't get a big multiple because it's very volatile. It's like, hey, this quarter it was great. Our prop desk, blew the doors off and we made all this money. But it's like, well, hey, how are you going to be able to really repeat that over time? And maybe that's not going to be valued as highly as the market as something where people have their accounts and they are using this and they're spending it, and it's less likely that they're going to move and transition. So, I think in looking at any type of revenue, looking at revenue where you have a great relationship with your customers, where the customers don't want to move to another place, where, subscription SaaS businesses, software as a service, is a classic case where if your customers are using it and liking it, maybe it's automatically coming out every month. That's sticky. They have to really take a choice to move away from your platform. Otherwise, you just keep getting paid and keep growing. So these are the types of things that will drive the multiple that various investors will apply to your business.
And do you think that customer loyalty is still a reality these days?
Absolutely. There are great brands out there. There are great experiences and relationships. Of course, in the digital world, it's very easy to move from one platform to the other. But there's a lot of things, explicit and implicit, that can be used to keep customers happy, and also just to make the path of least resistance to have them continuing to work with you. So I think those are all things to consider.
Okay, and you've got a really good feel for what is the general herd mentality at the moment in the industry. Is there do you have any personal philosophies or any personal holes that you think the investment industry is not looking at? Like, I've always found it surprising that they haven't looked at underwater exploration markets. It's a market that's ready to absolutely explode. Just something completely different that no one's really looking at. That is like just a vision of like that's fascinating. Tricky question.
Yeah, it is a tricky question, and I think now, so much is changing with COVID and travel restrictions and everything. There are, some businesses that are going bankrupt, and, you can probably pick up assets on the cheap. Other ones, are really poised for growth. I mean, you see some things like Zoom meetings, or, we're talking on right now, and some of these things are obvious, like, oh, well, hey, these are businesses everyone wants to get in, and they're really growing. But there's a lot of things that are, maybe second and third tier. There's a lot of implications of, connecting the dots to really develop an investment hypothesis that, I'm still doing, frankly, but have loved to, be getting involved with businesses like yours to explore and see where these things are. The NASDAQ is back near all-time highs. I think the VC sentiment, even though they're sitting on money, is that, hey, now they're a little bit more in the driver's seat. I think these days it's probably more prudent to raise a bit more as opposed to a bit less. Give yourself a little extra runway. And in terms of where the deals are or where things are overlooked, I think one of the areas that, personally in my career, I've always believed that there's a lot of arbitrage across international boundaries. Things that are cheap in one place can be expensive in another. Things that are a mature market in one area, if you take the learnings from that and apply it into another geography, you can do well. And I think that's something that is difficult for early stage investors to do. You have a global business. You're all across many parts of Africa and the Commonwealth and in the U.S. and so forth. That's something that you've been able to develop organically. But for investors coming in, a lot of times at the very early stages, they like opportunities close to home. So personally, I like things that I can understand. If I know, I live in France, but I grew up in the U.S. and I've, run businesses in, Beijing and Denmark and Bermuda and what have you. So if there's things that I can see based on my relationship, based on my network and so forth, and kind of can connect the dots on an international basis, that a more typical angel investor or whatever either doesn't have that background, or maybe their investment mandate or just their comfort level, they're not comfortable doing that. That's something that for me, myself, I see as an area that maybe I can step in and add some value.
Fair enough. And, there was talk about superfounders. If we're looking at out of the norm valuations, out of, you're moving away from herd mentality and trying to get buying, only for superfounders. So, obviously a super founder in hindsight is easy to spot. They've had great success and now it's, well, thank you very much. But do you think, it's almost like a double question, do you think people still back the jockey? Because sometimes you find an early jockey that comes across a certain way and you're like, I can spot it a million miles away. And then, and ultimately what makes a super founder? Because a super founder is someone who, in my opinion, says, well, hold on a second, I don't accept that. I don't accept the norm. These are my criteria for value. So just tell me a little bit about what would make a super founder, and, are they looking to build a sustainable business? Are they looking for exponential growth?
Yeah, I guess just, from the investor perspective, as you said, track record, it's a lot easier to go into the room and say, well, my last company was sold here and had this multiple, or, I'm here today because, I was just ringing the bell on the New York Stock Exchange last year, and then we had a great exit and so forth. people say, oh, I want that. And, founders that are in that fortunate position can really dictate terms in a way that first-time founders or ones that haven't kind of gone through that and shown that success are going to have more difficulty doing. I think a lot of it is, what investor type are you? And some investors are value investors, some of them are growth investors. Some bet on the jockey and some bet on the horse. I think in my experience, especially at the earlier stages, if you're dealing with, say, angel groups and things like that, these are ones where there may be high net worth individuals. They're investing in companies based on a personal relationship with the founding team, based on some understanding of the underlying business. But those are investors that typically are going to be betting a little bit more on the jockey than on the horse. And, there may be things about your background that they like or that they don't like, or you can position a certain way in order to do that. Obviously it takes an enormous amount of motivation and dedication to make these businesses a success. I think investors, when they're trying to find a super founder, they look for, somebody that's really going to give it their all and has the right background and is going to be able to hit a number of bumps in the road and pick themselves up and keep going. And I think in businesses like software, generally, there are these sort of disproportional, the phrase of talking about a 10x engineer. And this is, in the software space, an engineer that literally may be able to be 10 times as effective as a similar engineer. And that's something that, is unique to certain types of businesses, but it's true. It is possible to find engineering teams and to be thinking about things in a certain way, depending on the type of computing challenge that you're trying to solve. It is indeed possible that someone's going to be able to do this with an order of magnitude less code or an order of magnitude shorter amount of time, or have something that is an order of magnitude more efficient than an alternate process or the default process or something like that. And I think that's what makes this space really exciting. If you're just cranking out widgets, maybe you do okay. But I think looking for these opportunities where you can have exponential returns or have big differences, there's an element of risk there, but I think that's what makes this so exciting.
Such a fascinating thing. When I hear the word exponential, it makes me sick. Because they expect, it's kind of like, hold on a second, the business will do well. Do you have any idea how difficult it is to pick up one client? It's all about quality. And now you're talking about licensing arrangements and exponential and so don't put so much pressure on. And I guess,
I'm talking to someone who just had 50 million Rand revenue hit in just over 2 years.
Sure. Thank you. Fair enough. It was actually 55, but I felt that 50 sounded better than 55, because you say 55 and go, oh, when are you going to hit 100? But if you say 50,
well, when are you going to hit 100? Come on, Adi.
Well, I can tell you that it took, I think, like about a year or something to hit 100 invoices. And it took about a year to hit 450 invoices. So we did grow significantly fast in year 2. And so I guess, one of the last questions really is do you think that people should work first and gain experience? Or do you think that these 20-something entrepreneur founders are really the shit? What do you think is actually the smart move? Because unfortunately I'm 41, 42 now, and I had to slave away for my 20s and my 30s, and unfortunately I'm skewed towards the 40. But what is the general consensus amongst the community?
I think it really depends on the opportunity. I worked with larger enterprises first, trying to get certain types of experience and training and so forth, and that made sense for my career. I only was really part of the founding team of a startup, after business school when I was around 30. But I'm advising another team of sophomore university students at my alma mater, the University of Pennsylvania. They're out of three women. I think one from China, one from Hong Kong, one from Korea. Very exciting business around the selling used textbooks and other types of things, but also something where they've got a class notes angle to it and things. And hey, they really understand it. They've really thought about it. They've got a way to get started on certain campuses. I think Penn and Duke is where they're going to get started without a ton of upfront capital. And they'll be able to. Hey, they're home due to COVID, so they thought, hey, we're not spending a lot of time in class. We've got some time. We understand this problem. We can build the app and get it in the App Store, and they're extremely motivated. I think they're not old enough to drink in the United States, but they're still getting started on it, and more power to them. I'm happy to help. I mean, for them, that made a lot of sense. And hey, whatever happens, they're going to learn a ton from what they're doing. So I'm certainly not going to tell them that this is too early. They're motivated. They want to give it a shot, and I'm going to support them and give them whatever advice I can. So.
It doesn't matter what your business is. If it's not thinking about how can we get to a point where we're an app, we're a platform, then I think you're just going to completely get left behind. You agree with that?
I think that's certainly something that many businesses need to really think about. And, it's something that can allow you to get started and get feedback very quickly. Some of these things, in almost every business, the assumptions that you go in, many of them are going to be incorrect. So a lot of it is about learning from your mistakes and being able to basically set your business up that you're reducing the highest amount of risk in the shortest amount of time for the least amount of capital. And I think the businesses that are the ones that are going to win are the ones that do that. And, it is with apps, certainly, and that allows you to accelerate that cycle and get feedback and test it out quickly in a way that you couldn't do when you were in a bricks and mortar business. But I think the same underlying principles apply to anything. If you look, again, coming back to Elon Musk, look at his tests. A lot of these rockets in these tests that he's doing, they blow up. But he does that on purpose. He really has these designs that they're really pushing the envelope, and they learn a lot from them. They try a number of new things, and you get to something that's really innovative. Now, these are on test stands with people standing far back and things like that. But failing quickly and learning a lot, as much as you can, I think is something that is easier to do with apps, but I think certainly applies across the spectrum as well.
Well, I always learn a lot with you, and thank you. It's been fun. I've enjoyed this interaction, and I'll see you on the other side.
Okay, sounds great, Adi. Thank you.